In 1974, when the club was organized, there was a lot of misinformation out there how stretch glass was made. There was a very noted author at the time, a glass author, I won't tell you his name, and he professed and wrote and everything. Stretch glass is made basically the way Carnival is made. It's sprayed, and then the glass worker would take it and stretch it out like this. And now we have stretch glass. Well, he was dead wrong. Those of us who were technically oriented, and I'm a chemist, knew differently. And I talked to Frank Fenton about a lot of these things. So the second year of the stretch glass convention was over at the Lafayette Hotel here in Marietta. We gathered there, and Frank took me aside and took me through the factory before anybody else to see how stretch glass was really made. And the day before he took the rest of the club through there to see it, they made some experimental pieces. Some of the glass workers that he had there were old timers. I mean, they were making glass for Fenton back in the 1930s. So they remembered a lot of the techniques that were used. And you will see pictured here, those are black, I didn't have a color camera at that time, and it's all black and white, but you will see the glass finisher here. And this guy was very talented, but he's one of the old timers. So anyway, Frank and I went through there, and Frank would not let me photograph anything that first day, because if the whole thing failed and fell apart, there's no use having pictures of something that was a failure. Well, they had it perfected, and the second day when we went through with the group, he says, okay, we're going to make some stretch glass using one mold. Took one of the molds that was a very plain mold, and this is the blank without doing any work. I had one devil of a time with that finisher. This man here, what's his job? He's a finisher. He takes a piece of glass and he crimps it, he does something to it, and I said, I don't want you to do anything with it. So,
but my job is to do something with it.
Correct. So this is the blank, this is the mold, and how it's basically made. It comes out, no iridization, and then they spray it and stick it back in the glory hole, and some of this iridescent spray starts to burn off, wrinkles up. Now we have stretch glass. Now it is true that if you do work it afterwards, you will tend to break the surface and it will become more accentuated, like this one is more accentuated. Mm-hmm. So in the process, you can get that. They made 46 pieces. The members of the Stretch Glass Society that were there at the time were each allowed to purchase one. Each one of us was given the opportunity to have one.
And they gave them numbers to see who would be number one, number two, number three.
Well, that too. But she wasn't with me. I had to fly back there alone, and I wanted to get one of each color. Well, there's two colors missing there. One blew up on me. They made the topaz, opalescent. They made the Persian pearl, the white. They made red. They made green, and they made blue. I was not lucky enough to get a green one. I got a blue one, and I've got it pictured there. We had it sitting on the shelf in the window. It exploded one day. Frank did warn us, however, that the glass was made quickly, was not properly annealed, that you may have some that will just break. So anyway, of the 46 pieces, I was able to purchase 6 pieces. Now on the bottoms of these, they have like NF4. That means new Fenton 4th piece that they made. I was trying to get the first one that they made, and lo and behold, I did. The first one that came off was the red one. And so they made some little bowls. There were a couple of these with the blanks. Made plates. People were enthralled with it. Several vases. Now the vase was made largely by this gentleman here. We called him the Swinger. And you're going to come over here and look at all of these. And the way we've got them laid out, the factory, the dinner with Frank Fenton centered, down in the room. Here's a presser here. You can see one of the bowls turned upside down as it's cooling. And you can see they're making another one in the back. Here's the Swinger. Here is one of the glass workers. That's one of the really old timers applying the dope. And here's the guy putting it back in for the refiring. Then we have some of the working equipment. For the fan vase, they have a special tool for that. Take one of these, shove it down there, squeeze it, fan vase. Fan vase coming out there. I wasn't interested in getting a fan vase. And here's your finisher. And here's one he just finished crimping. And here we're going into the annealing oven. And here's a picture showing all 46 pieces. Now this is a cut off portion. I had several pictures of it. But what you see there is a second mold. They were using one mold for all of the Stretch Glass Society. This mold was a cake plate mold. They were pressing cake plates in the other part of the factory. He brought it over and made two topaz opalescent cake plates. One all crimped edge, the other one flat cake plate. Frank Fenton took one home. His brother Bill took the other one home. Now, we thought they would go into the museum. They have never been seen since. And the last time I talked to Frank, I said, where are they? Who's got them? I don't remember. And, they're both gone. So somebody in the family has those. If they ever turn up, they are marked with the Fenton logo in the middle. They are not dated, however. So that was the first year they did it, 1975. Then, the following year, and probably late in 75, early 76, Frank again tried to make stretch glass as a line item. And this is where Kitty had some fun. Woke her up one morning. Remember, there's 3 hours difference between here and the Pacific coast. So he calls like 8 in the morning.
I think it was 7 or 6:30 before I got up to go to work.
Well, in his time it was like 8 or 9. So 3 hours earlier, that woke her up. So she's going to tell you about these 4 pieces here.
Well, those 4 pieces, Frank said they made right around 20 pieces. When I went through all of his letters, he always told me around. He says we make a batch. And of the 20 pieces, 8 of them were damaged. And he says we've already thrown it in the, actually, with the iridescent glass, they throw it in the pile that goes to the marble factory. They do not reuse the iridescent glass because that would contaminate the batch of glass, the molten glass on there. So anyway, he says, we played around with them and we've got some funny ones. One has a point going up. Parma glass people call it Jack in the Pulpit. He called it one horn. He says, I've got 2 horns. And I says, I want a flat plate, I want a bowl, I want a ruffled bowl, and I want 2 horns. And I've got another one at home we couldn't find. But out of the 20 pieces, there were 12 good pieces, and we have 6 of them. So I would call that a limited run on there. I don't know who got the others. He said he kept one for the factory and one for Bill. And who has the others, I don't know. And I never saw him in his warehouses because he was terrific. After we wrote the book, we would tell him we're gonna be there such and such day. He would have a light table set up with the lights, and he would open up the doors to all of his barns, the Bourne barn, the 2 Fenton barns, and then there was an interesting barn that had other companies' glass in it of the time period. And he just opened up the doors. At lunchtime, he would bring us some sandwiches, and then we would continue and for as long as we want. He even stayed after a couple of times, an hour or two after the factory closed for us. And he was just wonderful. Gave us catalogs to look at and all like that. All of these are made, marked with a Fenton in an oval on there, so you can clearly see who made it. And it was 1970.
No,
Yes, it was 1976 or 77.
late 75.
75, sorry. Wrong decade.
So at any rate, these are experimental pieces. But it did teach their workers how to make a better quality than those. And they were experimental, so he could go on to make line items, which we've all seen the late line items that they've made some beautiful glass with a good stretch finish.
Before
Now-
we went to those, though, he played around, and the bases, he didn't like the openings because they're not a nice clean oval or just a ruffle. You know, they're kind of weird on there. So he played around. He got this
Wait a minute.
mold there.
He pulled this particular mold. It's an old mold. This is an old piece from the 20s. There's 2 green ones over there. There's this one. And it's the exact mold that he used to experiment with these in 1976.
Again, it was a run around 20. And we have 6 of them in red, white, and blue, 2 each color. And I don't know what happened to the others. He said he saved one for Bill and one for himself. I never saw those in any of the barns either. But he, in his office, the first time we went in, we're interviewing him and all, and he said, "Just a minute." And he tapped on his wall, and it opened up, and it's shelves that are crammed. A piece fell out of the shelf. And it was just crammed, and he just jammed it back in there. But he knew where each piece was in the shelving units in his wall. And we would ask about certain molds, and, well, that kind of looks like another company. So he would show us what the other company did on there.
Acid etch.
And
Yeah.
it was wonderful. But it was after we wrote our book,
Using
you know,
the
it's
same mold.
frustrating. So we were gonna do a second book, but it was too much work on there. So we waited for Dave and John to do their book.
The acid etch marking on
He's
it.
showing you the base. Something I wanted to show you, I don't know,
Acid
most
etched.
of you know about, that Fostoria tried one piece of stretch glass, and they made a full run of it, of about 20, 25 pieces, they told me. And it
Not
just
embossed,
was
acid
not
etched.
profitable at all on there. They actually tried a number of different kinds of glass that were popular, and they wrote these were the one-of-a-kind runs, and it didn't work out. So if you ever want to do weights, you know, lifting, just get 2 of these and you'll have really firm arms, because they are heavy. The other
Yeah.
thing we did,
We're not done here.
okay, you can go on.
Now,
He's
we
not done, I am.
we have the vases here, and you can see that they're really neck down. They're nothing like the old. But it is the original old mold, and if somebody were to take a polishing tool, the signature they use was an acid etch. All the others have an embossed trademark. And we've never seen any more of those. But they have, well, this particular one, it's kind of twisted. And the old ones aren't. Was their second attempt. You finished with Fostoria?
Yeah, and we talked about that last night.
And
yesterday.
we did that one.
Uh-huh.
That's one of their new ones, but oh, this is one that they did in 1980, and they were still using an old mold, so they etched it in there.
That was before they came out with the pastel blue and the velvet rose new lines that they were trying things out.
This one is not marked, but I left the label on it. This is the one that they says, well, this works good. They made these especially for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the ones that were first quality have MMA on them.
That was their prototype that they had in the museum. And that color was the only color they used for the Metropolitan Museum of Art on there. And
Did you talk about that one?
well, we talked about it briefly. They can come out and look at it. It's a piece of the reissue of Imperial, and I went
Big
through
IG.
box after box looking at their new pieces in the 1970s, and that one had all kinds of stretch on it, so I had to have it on there. Most of them do not have it. That was one of our club souvenirs in the very beginning, as was this one here. And this one is the club souvenir. Says SGS 19. Well, it says 77 for 1977. And I thought the pig was really cute, and the little Gibson piece is cute.
And this one is 1979 SGS.
Yeah, that's a Kreider piece.
Yes, it is. It's Mark Kreider.
Yeah.
And then we have one of the West German plates turned over with their label on them, just so you can refresh your memory on there, that those were from the mid-70s. We bought the whole line, and when we purchased the whole line, in those days we didn't have much money, so we sold off all the pieces. And luckily I kept those two pieces in a tumbler just for representatives. Now I'd like to have all of them back, because now they're starting to escalate in sales and value. David, it's yours.
Okay, we had, if you'll check your schedule, originally we had another person that was going to talk about the actual club pieces that were made, and I'm seeing people in this room that were with us at those times. And that's also why I brought Joanne here, because she was at those times where they made some of the early club pieces. As was indicated, the Summit Glass had made an iridized pig. They're all red Amberina, and as they just have a scribed pin on the bottom that just says SGS 77 on those, and so you might be able to find these, but unless it has that scribed SGS 77 on it, it may have been a pig that they sold somewhere else. Then Terry Kreider was enlisted. He was very active in the factory during the early 70s, and so they made this cute little Jack in the Pulpit green vase with the pulled feather lines in it. There are two other club pieces that were made, and they're not here. In 1984, there was a teapot, and unfortunately, all I have is a picture of the teapot. It's a little crystal teapot with cobalt blue on the interior of it, and then let's see if I can get.
That was a souvenir piece?
This was a souvenir piece.
You have one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, where's my? It's hard for me to see this bass backwards here. Yeah. See if I can get over here. Okay, so there's another image, and here's the bottom of it. You can see the bottom of it. Do you remember who that one was made by?
The guy that did the lamps with the flowers.
St. Clair.
St. Clair.
St. Clair. Okay, that's yeah. It's STCL. I couldn't make out the name, so there's St. Clair embossed in the bottom of that one.
And it's a regular line item, so you have to look for the SGS
They were made in all different
Right.
colors.
And then in 1985 was the snail. And the snail was this one was made by Fenton, I believe. It's a purple snail, iridized. And again, if I can get over here, I've got several images of Joanne's. That's the back of it. Again, another shot at the front of it. And then on the underside of it, it just, again, says SGS 1985 Dawn Fenton.
Blue.
Yeah.
it's blue.
Mine-
Okay. It's a dark blue. Okay.
Find them, Neil.
Then we had a brake. Forgot to bring this one up.
We had
And so we're in 80.
we had this in 1996.
That
This
was
nice
in Manassas.
collection.
We did that.
Okay.
Of
Yeah.
dolphins.
Yeah.
Okay. Now here's the 1987 was this cobalt blue swirl ball, and
And
That
the
may have been a
mushroom.
Kreider piece too, but I'm not sure.
it certainly looks like it. Let's see if I can get to the bottom of it. Yeah, at the bottom of it, it says Terry Kreider here, 1987, on that one. And Joanne had brought these to convention a few years ago, and I tried to get pictures of them, so I had an archive of that. Now, once we move out of those, I remember in 93, Frank Fenton contacted us, and he said, "Would you like us to make you a club piece?" And of course we said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so we got into negotiation with them, and so I remember in the winter of 94, they called us up and said, "We're ready to do your piece, and would you like it in ruby?" And I said, "Absolutely." And they said, "We've decided that the twin dolphin would be the one that we want to do." And notice what they did to the dolphin mold. Here's the original old mold cleaned out. And if you take a look at the foot, it's a really heavy chunk of glass in the bottom of that. And they said, we retool the foot to bring it up to modern spec. So the modern ones have this really thin foot, much more delicate. To me, it meets the needs of the vase a lot more. But in 1994, they made a pretty heavy run of these red stretch pieces. And if you look in the bottom of these, all of the number ones, the ones that met our needs, have a acid etched Frank Fenton signature in the bottom of them, and SGS 1994, and that was our club piece. They did make a few whimsies of these, but there aren't many around at that time. Let's see, get that back over here. Then in 95, since we had such great success in 94, we said we'd like to do that again. We like the dolphins. The dolphins are fine. Could you make it an unusual color? And we know that black is not common in stretch. And Frank was a little reluctant with that. And I found out later the reason why he was a little reluctant is that they weren't sure that they had a black glass that would iridize well. Because you don't realize the chemistry of this is all interactive. The glass has to react correctly with the iridescent dope that's applied to it and so forth. But the bottom line is that they did make us a black twin dolphin fan base. And at the same time, they also had a purple in one of their pots, and so they also made some purple whimsies at that time. So that was in 95. In 96, we went back and we, at that time, they were making a light cobalt blue. And so in this case, we again used the dolphin molds. And so we made the club piece at that time was this square twin dolphin comport and a light cobalt blue. The following year, in 97, we said, we really like that black stretch. Can you make us some more of it? And they said, well, you know, you've already got the fan base. What else would you like? And we said, well, how about just flaring out the edge? And so we got these that were flared out, and they made a ton of these. And since they met our specs of the one we needed, Frank turned them loose to do whimsies. And boy, did they make whimsies. They made whimsies of every shape, form that you could imagine. And I was just licking my chops. At that time, the Steinbachs were with us. They made a whole set of these. They flattened some down to literally plates and so forth. The problem is that they put so much stress in the glass, they didn't set the leer correctly. And when they came out the other end, all the ones that had the really heavy treatments to them were literally in pieces when they came through. And Frank was heartbroken, we were heartbroken, and only a few of them actually made it through, that are the ones that were really tortured and changed around. And by the way, that was the time Fetty was doing a lot of this. He was doing a lot of those changes at that time. Let's see, in 1998, actually in about Christmas time of 97, Jim Mazzell called us up. And he said, we've discovered the dolphin-handled sandwich tray mold in the factory. We're trying to clean it up. We're trying to find the snaps that are needed for it. And in this particular case, what the snap is a double-jawed material that snaps over this, and it's in the shape of the dolphin. And a few weeks later, he called us back and said, we found the snaps. We can do this. And so we went in again that winter, and it was so funny watching them because when this comes out of the mold, it's actually molded like this. There's a two-piece mold down at the bottom of it, and then there's a bowl mold. So it comes out as a big bell with the dolphin as the handle. So what they have to do is they have to fold that bell down to make it flat. And since the workers had never done this, all the workers that were there had never done it, what they made was a whole bunch of bowler hats. They just couldn't figure out. We were and so they just couldn't figure out how to flatten this down, and eventually they figured out you really have to heat it and make it very pliable to get it flattened down, because they're in the mold. There's actually a little rim right here, and this piece is supposed to sit on that rim, not on this rim. In that, but it was interesting, fun. We got a bunch of pieces, and everybody was happy because it was a really nice dark purple, and as you can see, they really got good iridescence on a lot of those pieces. Okay, in 1999, they were producing this lavender, light lavender glass, and Frank said, we found the old tulip bowl mold. Would you like to have some of those made? And so our club piece at that time was this lavender tulip bowl. Now, to me, virtually all of these, if you feel the old tulip bowl compared to the new tulip bowl, these are always really heavy, and the real reason for that, I thought maybe they had to clean the molds out. They might have had to ground them down. They were probably rusty and so forth. And Frank kind of grinned one time, and he says, no, Dave, we make them a little thicker because that keeps them from breaking so much. And so they actually deliberately made them thicker glass to reduce the amount of breakage in that. But when you pick one of these things up, you know it's a new piece rather than an old piece. You don't really have to look at it. As with the black piece, they did an entire run for us. And after they had met our club needs for the flared bowl, Frank turned them loose to do the whimsies. And as you can see, they just tortured that every which way that you can imagine. And in this case, they actually got the leer at the right temperature, and they all pretty well came through. And I think this was one of the first years when we were a club piece that we thought, oh my, how can we buy all of this stuff? So there were a lot of these pieces that we actually had to turn over to the Fenton shop and sell out of there. But we got as many of them as we could. Being on a good run, in 2000, we said we'd like to go back to red. Ruby is just really very popular. And at that time, they had come out with a candy jar that had a rib optic in the inside of it. And so they made us the club piece. This was the standard club piece for that, just flared over. But as you can see, they really doped these very heavily. And what's interesting to me, they use such a heavy ruby selenium in this. Some of them almost verge on a slaggy red. They really got very heavy in that. And Frank, again, was demanding that they just fire them like mad until they're red through and through. And there's almost no piece of this that you can see much hint of amberina in them. Again, once they finished our club pieces, they turned them loose, and as you can see, there were quite a few whimsies made out of that one. In 2001, we went to a light color. We had done all these darker colors. We went to a light color, and they had this very light aquamarine type. And again, our club piece was this two sides up type. And when Frank turned them loose, they did make some whimsies in here. Here's a little crusted piece, and they made a couple of baskets and so forth. But they didn't make as many whimsies during this particular year for this piece. The following year, I wasn't able to go, but Jim Steinbach was able to go down. They switched over to this emerald green. And apparently, they had a couple of molds for this, and apparently they can pump these out in real fast order. And we still, to this day, Cal, I don't know, do we have like 50 or 60 of these or even more in storage? But the actual club piece was this shape in here. But after they had made enough number of sets for our club's needs, you can again see that they turned the workers loose, and they did everything that they could. A little heart shape, crimping of all shapes and forms, and so forth. They really went to town on it, but we bought the whole run, and we still have quite a few of those around. In 2003, I was able to get back, and I've got video of these. They made this topaz opalescent 3-footed bowl with the square crimping. That was the official club piece. But again, after the runs, they did a whole bunch of others, and then they sent some of them to the decorating shop. Joanne was very pleased about that. She likes decorated pieces. And again, if you take a look at these decorated pieces, you'll see the artist signatures on many of those. And of course, they sold those to us, and we auctioned those off at the Stretch Glass convention. The one thing that I remember about this one is that they did swing a few of these. And the problem with that is that there's a fairly complicated snap that has to hold on to the 3 legs. And I remember taking the videotape of the swinger, and he had pulled it out, and he started to twirl it, and about that time, Dave Fetty said, "Dave, you probably ought to move." And about that time, this piece of yellow glass went flying right by me, because the guy had swung it about so fast that the snap let go of it, and the glass went flying across the floor, hit the wall. It actually didn't shatter, it just sort of flattened it out and made a true whimsy at that time. Then we have in 2004, they switched to the diamond optic vase. You can see the diamond optic in here with the crimp top, and that was our official club piece. Again, the official club pieces, if you take a look at them, do have the marks on the inside. Some of them can be acid etched. This one is actually sandblasted. They found out the acid etching was too hazardous for OSHA, and so in later years they went to sandblasting to make those. But again, they made quite a few whimsies out of those, and some decorated pieces came out of the factory for that. In 2005, our club piece was this tall, ball-footed vase with the 3 crimps. Now, this isn't an official club piece because it's not marked, but the ones that are official are marked. Again, they made a whole bunch of these, and at that point in time, we just said we can't buy them all, and so they did sell quite a few of them out of the shop. Then we went to the 3 crimped low bowl. This is the club piece for that. And in this one, you can see that they decided to paint in here, so that we're at 2007 Stretch Glass Society, small rib optic bowl with the 3 sides up on there. And then basically the last one that they made for us was a 2010 piece, which is this little cake stand. And this one is I had some difficulty with this one because when you see this on a table at a distance like that, it just looks purple. And you really got to get in there to take a look at it. It is stretched, but in this case, the iridescence just doesn't pop out on those pieces.
Too many flat surfaces.
Yeah, too many flat surfaces, and yeah. So, okay, that's it. Those are the stretch glass club pieces that we have documentation of, and give you an idea. I think most of you probably already have some of these. But if you were a younger collector, eventually these are going to show up on the market, and people may want to know what they are. Thank you very much.